Hi there, welcome to the first episode of my 10-minute moan-off today, and the topic of this one is looking at some of the coverage on the 10th anniversary of the failed independence referendum in Scotland. Now obviously I'm a unionist. If you need to explain that, you've probably never watched any of my videos before. So 10 years ago was quite an emotional time for me, and I spent most of the run up to that, as most Scots did, being welcomed in the streets by a sea of yes banners, yes stickers, yes things on windows, and the way the media were hyping it up, we were all led to believe that the yes campaign was going to win. But they didn't. The Unionists of Scotland were the first people in 300 years that had to do something to protect the Union. And thankfully, 2 billion of us done so. And what happened after that was, I was hoping that Scottish politicians and the society in general would accept the outcome of the referendum and the result and use the rules of devolution to the advantage of Scotland to make Scotland a better place. Unfortunately, that's not how it panned out. What happened, we've had the SNP now in control of Holyrood, our parliament, for 17 years. And since the loss of the referendum, all I've done year after year, week after week, day after day, is continually go on about independence. Blame Westminster, blame Brexit, blame the Tories, and now blame the Labour Party for any woes of the country. And instead of taking ownership of governing Scotland and making it better, and then potentially, persuade people into doing it, they must have felt that the worse they could make Scotland, the more likely people would be to vote in the future for the alternative, which would be an independent Scotland. And we saw, after 18 months to 2 years, after the 2014 referendum, every excuse, including Brexit, was material changes and we demanding other referendums. Right up until July this year, when we were told there was a de facto referendum with the latest general election. Now, the first person to tell us about this new de facto referendum was Nicola Sturgeon when she was the First Minister. And she told us that if the Scottish independence parties got 50% plus one vote of the voting from the electorate, that would be the democratic right to hold another referendum. Then Hamza Yousaf became the First Minister, and he changed the rules because he realised getting 50% of the vote would be a tough task. So he changed the rules to the majority of the seats. There's currently 57 seats in Westminster for Scottish MPs. He was therefore saying that if we had 29 seats, that would be a mandate for a referendum, which wouldn't be a mandate on the majority of votes, but a mandate due to the majority of seats. Those rules were adopted when John Swinney became the First Minister, so we headed into an election in July where he expected to get more than half the seats, and then that would give the Scottish Nationalists a mandate for a referendum. They got 9. So by any calculations, that, if you were wanting to use that as a de facto referendum, that would give you a massive failure with your 9 seats. But I don't let that stop them either. They just ignore that and they'll move on to the next excuse and the next excuse. And that's what we've had since 2014, when the referendum result didn't go the way the separatists wanted. So, we now, the only people having anything to do with celebrations this last week about this 10th anniversary are the separatists. We saw a rally in George Square, which was probably attended by about 2 men and a dog. I think the figures were between 200 and 300. And that should have given you an insight into the appetite for another independence referendum, or indeed independence itself. So today we see several SNP MPs, including the First Minister, give their opinions on what's happened to Scotland since the referendum. Now, the Herald have done an article called, with the headline, "Has Indy referendum had a positive or divisive legacy?" Now, having lived in Scotland all the way through since the referendum, I can tell you it's divisive. There's no ifs, there's no ands, no buts. been a horrible place to live. Families have fell out over it and not made up, work colleagues, friendships, and people almost daily are still talking about independence. Everybody had to take a polar opposite stance. You were either a nationalist or a separatist. Sorry, a nationalist or a unionist. And that's remained all the way through to this day. There has been nobody trying to mend the wounds. However, this article will give you an idea on how the SNP see things, which is completely potty, if I'm honest. So, has the referendum had a positive or divisive legacy? There are many words that can be used to describe the legacy left by the Scottish independence referendum, but would you, as John Swinney has, call it positive? A decade ago, voters were asked whether Scotland should be an independent country, with 55% of those voting against compared to 45% in favour. The constitutional issue is still one of the most widely discussed issues across the country, and the results shows why. A result so close was always going to divide opinions. On the anniversary of the vote, though, it could be argued that the legacy left 10 years on is one of continual divide. I agree with that. Reflecting on the movement, First Minister and SNP leader John Swinney said there had been an overwhelming positive legacy left on Scotland. What planet does John Swinney live in? Right? Because it ain't Scotland if he thinks there's been an overwhelming positive legacy. This man is insane if that's his genuine beliefs. And if it's not his genuine beliefs, he's just telling lies. Either way, it's no good. His SNP deputy, Keith Brown, echoed that view during a speech to pro-independence voters this morning. Mr Swinney said, "I am no doubt that Scotland's independence referendum has left an overwhelming positive legacy on our country." Mr Brown went a step further, opening the event by telling those in favour of Scottish independence that the issue had not been a divisive one. Do both SNP politicians really believe this, or are they telling their supporters what they want and need to hear? The issue of Scottish independence remains a dominant force in society, but the discourse around it is rarely positive. Ask any politician or journalist who were around during the campaign for their experiences. Positive does not often come up. Words like divisive and toxic do. A decade on from the vote, a division created by the campaign does not appear to have subsided. I agree with that. There remains a prevalence of online abuse that is stuck to social media posts relating to the referendum and its key political figures since. To this day, there's an abundance of abuse thrown from either side of the independence argument, and it does not have to be related to any issue. It's mostly just nasty attacks, which are too often directed to people involved in the campaign. These often anonymous posts are rarely worth viewing and are filled with hatred, with people using independence debate to tear apart personal attributes to people. Former First Minister Sturgeon reflected on the independence campaign this week. She admitted that at the time there were many tensions in the campaign. It wasn't all sweetness and light, she wrote in the Daily Record this week to reflect on the referendum anniversary. While for yes voters the referendum was an opportunity to win something that felt precious, the independence of our nation, for no voters it represented a threat to the union they cherished. The stakes were high, the tensions were sometimes rose to meet them. Meanwhile, former Scottish Secretary Alistair Carmichael also reflected on the decade. You saw people, there were a lot of people, it really quite a scary thing, it was scary. You saw people like Ed Miliband, for example, basically just being mobbed off the streets. And there were people who just felt that it wasn't safe to speak their mind, generally, on the no side. I would agree with that as well. A change in the legacy is, perhaps in the last few years, as independence movement fails to progress, we've seen attacks move from those on either side of an argument to disgruntled independence supporters who do not believe their politicians have done enough to move the cause forward. People disagree on many issues in life, from music up to political stances and lifestyle choices. However, it is rare to see such disagreement caused social splinters spanning over a decade. If the First Minister is only speaking to those who believe in independence, describing it as a positive may come as a shock. But if there are hopes of reaching a wider audience, it seems important to acknowledge that people have been hurt along the way. Until these bridges can be rebuilt, it is difficult to see the legacy of independence referendum as anything but divisive and damaging. And I agree with the vast majority of the article written by Rebecca McCurdy for the Herald. So what do we need to do? I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to get enough people into Holyrood in 2026, where the next election is planned for, that are not separatists. And I don't mean just unionists, because there's three types of people in this argument, although a lot of people would like us to take polar stands. There are unionists, there are separatists, but there's a big chunk of people in the middle who are like, not that bothered. If the referendum comes up again, they'll make a decision then. What they want is a better Scotland just now. So we need these people and the unionists to take control of Holyrood come 2026, so that the minority in that building are wanting an independent Scotland. And what we'll do then is we'll spend 5 years not talking about independence, banish it from the discussions, and for at least that time, if not forever, we will have people in Parliament in Holyrood who will do their utmost to improve Scotland after 17 years of abuse by the SNP. That's what we need to do. And I've already told you guys that I'll be standing, and I hope many more do. And it doesn't matter to me if they were Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Reform or SNP, or even independent candidates. As long as they are pro-union and not interested in talking about referendums during their time in Parliament, I'll stand beside you. And where we agree, we'll fight together. And that's the way it's got to be. So come 2026, let's hope there's enough people who are not separatists who want to go to Holyrood. And then we get in there and we sort the job out. We fix the ills of 17 years of SNP torture on the Scottish people. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell. But most importantly of all, unless you are some of these people that have spent the last 17 years and the last 10 dividing our nation to the detriment of Scotland and, to a certain degree, the United Kingdom. Not you. See everybody else.
Everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.